There's trouble. We're troubled. We're not going to make it. We're out of money. We're not going to make it. George Washington's diary. I sent for Heim. Benjamin Franklin. It's time to send for Heim. All of them. Heim Solomon. Every time there was trouble, every time we had no more money left, every time our back was up against the wall, it was a Jewish man that saved us. Heim Solomon. If it wasn't for a Jewish man, there would be no America.
Yeah, all right.
The point is, if it wasn't for George Washington, there would be no America. If it wasn't for Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, there would be no America. If it wasn't for Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, there would be no America. If it wasn't for the farmers that got up and took their one rifle from over the fireplace and went to take on the biggest army of all time and navy of all time, there would be no America. If it wasn't for Heim Solomon, there would be no America. Why are we looking for a leader? Here are your leaders. Everyone plays a role. And you must understand that you were born at this time for a reason. You were put here at this time in this country for a reason. I don't know what that reason is. You may not even know what that reason is. Quite honestly, most of the times, I don't know what my reason is. But I am trying. And I challenge you to try to figure out why you're here. And it is something that will seem small and insignificant. I got news for you. I got all kinds of big plans and everything else. I'm trying to do everything I know. I'm going to get up past the pearly gates and say, okay, Lord, tell me what it was. What was the one thing I was supposed to do? And he'll tell me. I'm going, crap. That was it. Well, I did that on a Tuesday. Whatever it is, do it. Thomas Paine hated George Washington in the end. Thomas Paine was the reason we had the revolution. He wrote Common Sense. And Common Sense was read by the common man. And they said, really? That's really what's going on? That's out of control. Yes, it's common sense that you should be free. It's common sense that you can do better. It's common sense that you don't have a king rule over you. It's common sense that God gives you your rights. And no man can take that away from you. It is common sense. And that's why... That's why on July 2nd, we signed the Declaration of Independence. Not the 4th, the 2nd. Signed the Declaration of Independence. And then what was that? We're going to war with the most powerful military ever on planet Earth. That doesn't sound like a good idea. When they asked George Washington to be the commander-in-chief, when they asked him to command the military, he said, I don't want it. No. In fact, he wanted it so little that he encouraged the congressmen to tear him apart. When they were debating, they were like, George Washington should be the guy, and he's there, and instead of being like, yeah, that's me, he said instead, you know what, guys, I'm sure there's some bad things that, remember that thing that you really hate about me? You should bring that up right now. In fact, you probably are feeling bad about bringing it up because I'm in the room, so I'm going to go stand outside where I won't be able to hear you guys tear me to shreds. But they didn't. His whole life was spent doing stuff he never wanted to do. Every step of the way, he didn't want to do it. Everything. Oh, geez, his mother, at 16 years old, he just wants to go to be a sailor on a British ship. He tries to join the British Navy. He's got his trunk up on the boat, and his mama says, oh, no, George, no, don't leave me now. Oh, no. And so at 16, he's like, oh, crap. My overly dramatic mother is down there. He drags his stuff down. No, you're not going to go. No. Because he sacrificed for the good of his mother. He sacrificed in war for the good that he felt God was telling him to do. He just wanted to be a farmer. He wins the war. The Articles of Confederation fall apart. He's farming now. He's happy now. And it falls apart, and there's a knock on his door, and they come to his door and say, "George, you got to come to Washington. We're going to lose the country." His response is so telling. "Have I not yet given enough for my country?" I see him in my mind's eye say that and slam the door and walk away and walk just a few steps to the banister and put his hand on the banister. In my mind's eye, I see him saying to himself, which he never would, "Damn it!" The next day, he got on his horse and rode to Philadelphia. He said nothing. He sat there in a chair saying nothing as he watched a bunch of weasel politicians try to negotiate the beginning of the United States of America. They tried to negotiate the Constitution. How he just must have been sickened by listening to them. New York starts in. They don't even want anything. They want us to fix the Articles of Confederation. Well, they won't work. Well, we can't go up to our constituents in New York and tell them that. They don't want a new constitution. They don't trust government as it is. Unless, one says, unless the other colonies would see fit to give some of our New York constituents something. All eyes turn to Washington. And he says, "We've worked this long. We have the opportunity now to do one thing right. To really do something right. We could squander this opportunity now and bargain and deal, but we will carry that to our grave. This is the moment, and we didn't stand to the highest honor." He rose from his desk and said, "Let us raise a standard that the wise and the honest can repair. The event is in the hand of God. That's why we have a Constitution." And his challenge, his statement was to us. He knew that it would come undone. He knew that the weaselly politicians would again say, "Well, I could make this happen if just," and it would fall apart. But he knew if they did it right that one time, if they sacrificed, if they put their petty differences aside, if they put their wants aside, if they put themselves aside, and did one thing right because it was right, the wise and the honest would repair it. That is the challenge of our generation. It is bigger than fighting Adolf Hitler. It is bigger than a civil war. Can we rise to the occasion, the honest and the just, and repair it? The answer is yes. And how do we do it? We do it with firm reliance on divine providence. God played a role every step of the way in this country. George Washington, he got down on his knees and begged. As they signed the Declaration of Independence, as they're getting ready to do it, he gets on his knees and he tells people, please, please fast, pray. Get on your knees and fast and pray and beg God's protection. Tell God, I will live my life, and we as a people, we as a community, we as a family will live our life in a right and justice and just sort of way, a righteous life. We will serve you, God, and you alone, if you will protect this venture called America. He did it in April. And then he asked the people of the country to do it again in July because he knew what was coming. He asked every pulpit, every preacher, preach it. Tell your people, Make a covenant with God. And they did. And we saw the miracles that came from it. We could see the hand of God at work starting in Long Island that very summer. If you read their words, they talk about the divine providential fog that rolls in. Washington has already retreated from New England. He's now on Long Island. He's now fighting the British. The British are behind him on warships, the biggest warships ever built. They're coming on the river. They're coming behind him. He's trapped. He's got to get to Manhattan. But the ships are behind him, and the English are fighting in front, and they're squeezing him like that. He knows they're doomed, except he has faith. Keep fighting, men. Keep fighting and keep retreating. God will protect us. Stay virtuous. Stay people of merit. God will protect us. They get to the shore, and a divine providential fog, as both the people on the English and the American side describe it. An unseen fog, a fog never seen like that before, a fog not seen anywhere else in Manhattan that day, just at the point of crossing. The other thing that happened, a strange wind pushed these warships back up the river. Pushed them that way. They couldn't come down that far. They were there waiting. Pushes them back. Fog drops down. Washington says, cross now, boys. Cross now. They cross, they get across. The last man on shore is George Washington himself. He gets there, the fog lifts. Providential. They now get all the way down. He loses Manhattan, he loses New Jersey, and they cross another river. They had 20,000 men. It's just a few months later. That was in the summer. A few months later, right at Christmas time, they've gone from 20,000 troops to 2,000. Nothing left. Washington is there with his people. Already the people in Philadelphia, all of the politicians, they do what politicians do best. They stick their tail between their legs and they run like little girls. They're already gone. And Washington is there. And he says, guys, we got to turn around. We got to go back north. And his troops look at him, a bunch of farmers. They have nothing. They don't even have boats. And they say, you're out of your mind. Washington's team is falling apart. Somewhere else, the guy who ends up hating George Washington, and George Washington never speaks to again, is marching in the mud. And he's standing next to a drummer, and he's marching, and he's hearing the drum. And the drum is beating, the drum is beating, and he hears in his head the words, now is the time that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot, oh, they'll retreat now. But those who stand, the rest of us will owe forever. I butcher that. He's much more poetic than I am. But he didn't have a piece of paper to write it down on. And he looks to the drummer and says, I need the head of your drum right now. I got to write something down. He takes the head of the drum off and he writes those words, rolls it up, gives it to a man on horseback and says, write it to Philadelphia, print it, and then find Washington. You've got to get it to Washington. They print it. It's called The Crisis. It's the follow-up from Common Sense, The Crisis. And basically it is saying, you said you wanted independence. You said you wanted this, and now it gets tough, and now you run and hide. This is it. Washington receives it as he's standing on the banks of the southern side of the Delaware. He says, men, gather round. And he reads those words. And they attack. They cross the Delaware and they attack, and the whole thing turns. In the end, I have a letter written by Thomas Paine to George Washington. It's after Washington let him rot in jail in the Bastille in France, long after the Revolution. And Thomas Paine says to George Washington, I never thought you would be the one to betray us. Washington never responded. They never spoke of or to each other again. The point is, they are both patriots to us. They may be different, and they had different roles. What is your role? As my kids get ready about this time every night for bed, it's a ritual, and I'll bet it's not much different than the ritual that you have with your kids. And that is, you finish up dinner